Stylish Stouts by P.G Wodehouse. "Ah, there you are, Mr. Little," said H.C. Purkiss. "Are you engaged for dinner tonight?" Bingo replied, but before recording Bingo's reply, it is necessary to go back a step or two and do what is known to lawyers as laying the proper foundation. It was the practice of H.C. Purkiss, proprietor of Wee Tots, the journal for the nursery and the home, to take his annual holiday in July. This meant that Bingo, the paper's up-and-coming young editor, had to take his in June or August. This year, as in the previous year, he had done so towards the middle of the former month, and he rejoined the human herd, looking bronzed and fit, a few days before the Eton and Harrow match. And he was strolling along Piccadilly, thinking of this and that, when he ran into his fellow clubman, Catsmeat Potter Purbright, Claude Catamol, the popular actor of juvenile roles. And after a conversation of great brilliance, but too long to be given in detail, Catsmeat asked him if he would care to have a couple of seats next week for the dramatic entertainment in which he was appearing. And Bingo, enchanted at the prospect of getting into a theatre on the nod, jumped at the offer like a rising trout. He looked forward with bright enthusiasm to seeing Catsmeat bound on with a racket at the beginning of Act 1, shouting, "Tennis, anyone?" as he presumed he would do. There remained the problem of choosing a partner for the round of pleasure. His wife, Rosie M. Banks, the widely read author of novels of sentiment, was at Droitwich with her mother and Algernon Aubrey, the bouncing baby who had recently appeared on the London scene. He thought of Mr. Purkiss, but rejected the idea. Eventually, he decided to go and ask his Aunt Myrtle, Mrs. J.G. Beanstalk, if she would like to come along. It would mean an uncomfortable evening. She would overflow into his seat, for she was as stout a woman as ever paled at the sight of a diet sheet, and had she been in Parliament, would have counted 2 on a division. But she was a lonely, or fairly lonely, widow, and he felt it would be a kindly act to bring a little sunshine into her life. He ankled round accordingly to her house, and his ring at the bell was answered by Wilberforce, her butler, who regretted to say that Madam was not in residence, being on one of those Mediterranean cruises. He was anticipating her return, said Wilberforce, either tomorrow or the day after. And Bingo was about to push off when the butler, putting a hand over his mouth and speaking from the side of it, said in a hushed whisper, "Do you want to make a packet, Mr. Richard?" A packet being what, above all things, Bingo was always desirous of making. His reply in the affirmative was both immediate and eager. "Put your shirt on Whistler's mother for the 2 o'clock at Hurst Park tomorrow," whispered Wilberforce, and having added that prompt action would enable him to get odds of 8 to 1, he went about his butlerine duties, leaving Bingo in a frame of mind which someone like the late Gustave Flaubert, who was fussy about the right word, would have described as chaotic. What to do? What to do? He was asking himself, this way and that, dividing the swift mind. On the one hand, Wilberforce was a knowledgeable man who enjoyed a wide acquaintance with jockeys, racecourse touts, stable cats, and others who knew a bit. His judgment of form could surely be trusted. On the other hand, Mrs. Bingo, who, like so many wives, was deficient in sporting blood, had specifically forbidden him to wager on racehorses, and he shrank from the scene which must inevitably ensue should the good thing come unstuck, and she found out about it. The situation was unquestionably one that provided food for thought. And then he realized that his problem was, after all, only an academic one, for he was down to his last 5 bob, with nothing coming in till payday, and with bookies money has to change hands before a deal can be consummated. If a dozen Whistler's mothers were entered for a dozen 2 o'clock races, he was in no position to do anything about it. It was quite a relief, really, to have the thing settled for him, and he was in excellent spirits when he got home. He took off his shoes, mixed himself a mild gin and tonic, and was about to curl up on the sofa with a good book when the telephone rang. A well-remembered voice came over the wire. "Sweetie?" "Oh, hello, sweetie. When did you get back?" "Just clocked in." "How are you?" "I'm fine, though missing you sorely. And you?" "I'm fine." "And Algy?" "He's fine." "And your mother?" "Only pretty good. She swallowed some water at the brine baths this morning. She's better now, but still makes a funny whistling sound when she breathes." The receiver shook in Bingo's right hand. The good book with which he had been about to curl up fell limply from his left. He had always been a great believer in signs and omens, and if this wasn't a sign and omen, he didn't know a sign and omen when he saw one. Did you say your mother was a Whistler's, or rather a whistling mother?" he gasped at length. "Yes, it sounds just like gas escaping from a pipe." Bingo tottered to a chair, taking the telephone with him. He was feeling bitter, and he had every excuse for feeling bitter. Here he was, with a sure thing at his disposal, barred from cashing in on it for lack of funds. Affluence had been offered to him on a plate with watercress round it, and he must let it go because he did not possess the necessary entrance fee. He could not have had a more vivid appreciation of the irony of life if he had been Thomas Hardy. "Oh, by the way," said Mrs. Bingo, "what I really rang up about, you know it's Algy's birthday next week. I've bought him a rattle and some sort of woolly animal, but I think we ought to put something in his little wee bank account, as we did last year. So I'm sending you £10. Goodbye, sweetie. I must rush. I'm having a perm, and I'm late already." She rang off, and Bingo sat tingling in every limb. He continued to tingle, not only till bedtime, but later. Far into the silent night he tossed on his pillow, a prey to the hopes and fears he had experienced when Wilberforce had mooted the idea of his making a packet. Once more the question, what to do, raced through his fevered mind. It was not qualms about touching his offspring for a temporary loan that made him waver or hesitate. That end of it was all right. Any son of his, he knew, would be only too glad to finance a father's sporting venture, particularly when that sporting venture was in the deepest and fullest sense of the words money for jam. And he did not need to tell the child that when the bookie brassed up on settling day he would get his cut and find his little wee bank account augmented not by 1 tenner but by 2. No, it was the thought of Mrs. Bingo that made him irresolute. Wilberforce was confident that Whistler's mother would defy all competition, giving the impression that having a bit on her was virtually tantamount to finding money in the street. But these good things sometimes go wrong. The poet Burns has pointed this out to his public. Gang agley was how he put it, for he did not spell very well, but it meant the same thing. and if this one went agley, what would the harvest be? He fell asleep, still wondering if he dared risk it. But the next morning he was his courageous self again. The luncheon hour found him in the offices of Charlie Always Pays, Pikelet, the well-known turf accountant, handing over the cash, and at 2:13 sharp he was in a chair in the Drones Club smoking-room with his face buried in his hands. The result of the 2 o'clock race at Hurst Park had just come over the tape, and the following horses had reached Journey's End ahead of Whistler's Mother. Harbour Lights, Sweet Pea, Scotch Mist, Parson's Pleasure, Brian Boru, Ariadne, and Christopher Columbus. 8 ran. Unlike Wilberforce, the poet Burns had known what he was talking about. How long he sat there, a broken man, he could not have said. When he did emerge from his coma, it was to become aware that a good deal of activity was in progress in the smoking-room. A crumpet was sitting at the table near the door with a pencil in his hand and a sheet of paper before him, and there was a constant flowing of members to this table. He could make nothing of it, and he turned for an explanation to Catsmeat Potter Purbright, who had just taken the chair next to him. "What's going on?" he asked. "It was the fat uncle sweep," Catsmeat said. "The what?" Catsmeat was amazed. "Do you mean to say you don't know about the fat uncle sweep? Weren't you here last year when it started?" "I must have been away." "The race is run on the first day of the Eton and Harrow match." "Ah, then I was away. I always have to take my holiday early, and don't get back for the Eton and Harrow match. I did this time, but not as a rule. What is it?" Catsmeat explained. An intelligent drone, he said, himself the possessor of one of the fattest uncles in London, had noticed how many of his fellow members had fat uncles too, and had felt it a waste of good material not to make these the basis of a sporting contest, similar, though on a smaller scale, to those in operation in Ireland and Calcutta. The mechanics of the thing were simple. You entered your uncle, others entered theirs, the names were shaken up in a hat, and the judging was done by McGarry, the club bartender, who had the uncanny gift of being able to estimate to an ounce the weight of anything from a Pekingese to a Covent Garden soprano, just by looking at it. "And the fellow who draws the winning ticket," Catsmeat concluded, "scoops the jackpot, except, of course, for the £50 allotted to the winning uncle's owner as prize money." A loud gasp escaped Bingo. A passer-by would have noticed that his eyes were shining with a strange light. £50? That's right. Bingo shot from his chair and gazed wildly about the room. "Where's Oofy?" he cried, alluding to Oofy Prosser, the club's millionaire. "In the bar, I believe. What do you want him for?" "I want to enter my Aunt Myrtle and sell him a piece of her to enable me to meet current expenses." "But don't sit there saying but. When's the drawing?" 3 days from now. Plenty of time. I'll approach him at once." "But that word again. What's bothering you? If you think Oofy won't make a deal, you're wrong. He's a businessman. He'll know he'll be on a sure thing. You've seen my Aunt Myrtle, and you can testify to her stoutness. There can't possibly be an uncle fatter than her. Let's go and find Oofy now and have him draw up an agreement." "But aunts aren't eligible. Only uncles." Bingo stared at him aghast. "What? What did you say?" Catsmeat repeated his statement, and Bingo quivered in every limb. "You mean to tell me that if a man has the stoutest aunt in the West End of London, An aunt who, if she were not independently wealthy, could be making a good living as the fat woman in a circus, he can't cash in on her? I'm afraid not. What a monstrous thing! Are you sure? Quite sure, and it's all in the book of rules. It was a Bingo with heart bowed down and feeling more like a toad beneath a harrow than the editor of a journal for the nursery and the home, who returned to the offices of wee Tots and endeavoured to concentrate on the letters which had come in from subscribers for the correspondence page. He took up a communication from Edwin Waters, aged 7, about his Siamese cat, Miggles. But he found his attention wandering. He found the same difficulty in becoming engrossed in 4 pages from Alexander Albright, aged 6, about his tortoise, Shelley. And he had started on a lengthy screed from Anita Ellsworth, aged 8, which seemed to have to do with a canary of the name of Birdie, when the door of the inner office opened, and Mr. Purkiss appeared. "Ah, there you are, Mr. Little," said H.C. Purkiss. "Are you engaged for dinner tonight?" Which, if you remember, is where we came in. Bingo replied hollowly that he was not, and might have added that if his employer was about to invite him to share the evening meal, he was prepared to defend himself with tooth and claw. "I thought that Mrs. Little might be having guests." "She's at Droitwich with her mother. Her mother is taking the brine baths. She has rheumatism." "Splendid! Excellent! Capital!" said Mr. Purkiss, hastening to explain that it was not the fact of Bingo's mother-in-law having trouble with her joints that exhilarated him. "Then you are free. I am delighted to hear it. Tell me, Mr. Little, are you familiar with the work of an American author of juvenile fiction named Kirk Rockaway? No? I'm not surprised. He is almost unknown on this side of the Atlantic, but his Peter the Pup, Coochie the Kitten, and Hilda the Hen are, I understand, required reading for the children of his native country. I have glanced at some of his works, and they are superb. He is just the circulation builder we Tots needs. He is here in London on a visit." Bingo was a conscientious editor. His personal affairs might be in a state of extreme disorder, but he was always able to shelve his private worries when it was a matter of doing his paper a bit of good. "Well, we'd better go after him before those blighters at Small Fry get ahead of us," he said. Mr. Purkiss smiled triumphantly. "I have already done so. I met him at a tea-party given in his honour yesterday, and he has accepted an invitation to dine with me tonight at Barrabolt's Hotel." "That's good." "And this," said Mr. Purkiss, "is better. At that tea-party a most significant thing happened. Somebody mentioned Mrs. Little's books, and he turned out to be a warm admirer of them. He spoke of them with unbounded enthusiasm. You see what I am about to say, Mr. Little?" "He wants her autograph?" "That, of course, and I assured him that I could rely on her. But obviously tonight's arrangements must be changed. You see, you, not I, must be his host. As Mrs. Little's husband, you are the one he will want to meet. I will ring him up now." Mr. Purkiss went back to his room, to return a few moments later, beaming. "All is settled, Mr. Little. I am afraid, to stoop to a slight prevarication. I told him I was subject to a bronchial affection, which rendered it inadvisable for me to venture out at night, but that my editor, the husband of Rosie M. Banks, would be there in my place. He was all enthusiasm, and is looking forward keenly to meeting you. I will, of course, defray your expenses. Here are £10. That will amply cover the cost of dinner, for Mrs. Rockaway tells me he is a lifelong teetotaler, so there will be no wine bill. You can bring me the change tomorrow. To say that Bingo was elated at the prospect of an evening out with a man who wrote about hens and kittens and drank only lemonade would be incorrect. Nor did he fail to writhe at the thought that life had sprung another of its ironies on him by putting £10 in his trouser pocket, but making it impossible for him to divert the sum from Algernon Aubrey's little wee bank account. For one mad moment he toyed with the idea of not giving Kirk Rockaway dinner and holding on to Mr. Purkiss's tenner, but he discarded it. If he stood Kirk Rockaway up, the hen and kitten specialist would be bound to contact Mr. Purkiss and ask him what the hell, and Mr. Purkiss, informed of the circumstances, would instantly relieve his young assistant of his editorial post. And if he suddenly ceased to occupy the editorial chair, Mrs. Bingo would want to know why, and— But here Bingo preferred to abandon this train of thought. Shortly before 8 o'clock, he was in the lobby of Barrabolt's Hotel, and in due course Kirk Rockaway appeared. One says appeared, but the word would not have satisfied Gustave Flaubert. He would have suggested some such alternative as loomed up, or came waddling along, as being more exact, for the author of Coochie the Kitten and Peter the Pup was one of the fattest men that ever broke a try-your-weight machine. He looked as if he had been eating nothing but starchy foods since early boyhood, and it saddened Bingo to think of all this wonderful material going to waste. If only this man could have been his uncle, he felt wistfully. Oofy Prosser would have paid £20 for a mere third of him. "Mr. Little," said this human hippopotamus. He grasped Bingo's hand and subjected him to a pop-eyed but reverent gaze. "Well, well, well," he said, "this is certainly a great moment for me. Mrs. Little's books have been an inspiration to me for years. I read them incessantly, and I am not ashamed to say, with tears in my eyes. She seemed to make the world a better, sweeter place. I am looking forward to having the privilege of meeting her. How is she? Well, I hope?" "Oh, fine. That's good," said Kirk Rockaway, and then he uttered these astounding words. "Let's get one thing straight, Mr. Little. The money of Rosie M. Banks's husband is no good in this hotel. Dismiss all thought of picking up the tab tonight. This dinner is on me." "What?" "Yes, sir. I wouldn't be able to look Mrs. Little in the face if I let you pay for it." The lobby of Barrabolt's Hotel is solidly constructed, and the last thing in the world to break suddenly into the old-fashioned buck and wing dance. But to Bingo it seemed that it was forgetting itself in this manner. There were 2 pillars in its centre, and he distinctly saw them do a kick upwards and another kick sideways. Ecstasy for a moment kept him dumb. Then he was able to murmur that this was awfully kind of Mr. Rockaway. "Don't give it a thought," said Kirk Rockaway. "Let's go in, shall we?" Over the smoked salmon, what conversation took place was confined to Bingo's host. Bingo himself still felt incapable of speech. The realization that by this miracle of the 11th hour he had been saved from the fate which is worse than death, viz., having to confess the awful truth to Mrs. Bingo and listen to her comments on his recent activities, seemed to have paralyzed his vocal cords. He was still dazed and silent when the soup arrived. The evening was warm, and it had been quite a walk through the lobby and into the restaurant, and across the restaurant to their table, and Kirk Rockaway, evidently unused to exercise, had felt the strain. By the time the soup came, beads of perspiration had begun to form on his forehead, and after about the 5th spoonful he reached in his breast pocket for a handkerchief. He pulled it out, and with it came a cabinet-size photograph which shot through the air and fell into Bingo's plate. And as Bingo fished it from the puree and started to dry it with his napkin, something familiar about it struck his attention. It portrayed a woman of ample dimensions, looking over her shoulder in an arch sort of way, and with a good deal of surprise he recognized her as Mrs. J.G. Beanstalk, the last person he would have expected to find in his soup. "Well, well," he said, "so you know my aunt." "Your what?" "My aunt." Kirk Rockaway stared at him astounded. "Is this divine woman your aunt?" "That's just what she is." "You amaze me." "I'm amazed too. What are you doing, going about with her photograph next to your heart?" Kirk Rockaway hesitated for a moment. He seemed to be blushing, though it was hard to say for certain, his face from the start having been tomato-esque. Finally he spoke. "Shall I tell you something?" he said. "Do." "I've come all the way from Oakland, San Francisco, to marry her." It was Bingo's turn to stare, astounded. "You mean you and Aunt Myrtle are engaged?" So great was his emotion that he could hardly frame the words. It seemed to him too good to be true, too like a beautiful dream, that this obese bimbo was about to become his uncle, and so eligible for the Drones Club contest. An embarrassed look had come into Kirk Rockaway's face. Again he hesitated before he spoke. "No, we're not engaged." "You aren't?" "Not yet. It's like this. She came to San Francisco a year or so ago." "Yes, I remember. She went over to America. She's very fond of travelling." "We met at a dinner party. It was a Thanksgiving dinner, with turkey, sweet potatoes, mince pie, the customary Thanksgiving menu. She sat opposite me, and the way she sailed into the turkey, enjoying it, understanding it, not pecking at it, as the other women were doing, hit me right here," said Kirk Rockaway, touching the left side of his bulging waistcoat. "And when I watched her handle the mince pie, I knew my fate was sealed, but I haven't actually proposed yet." "Why not?" "I haven't the nerve." "What?" "No, sir, I haven't the nerve." "Why not?" "I don't know. I just haven't." A blinding light flashed upon Bingo. The Purkiss's words rang in his ears. "He is a lifelong teetotaler," Mr. Purkiss had said, and the whole thing became clear to him. "Have you tried having a drink?" he asked. "Barley water? I've drunk a good deal of barley water." "Barley water? But it seems to have no effect." "I'm not surprised. Barley water?" Bingo's voice was vibrant with scorn. "What on earth's the good of barley water? How can you expect to be the masterful wooer on stuff like that? I should be a bachelor today if I hadn't had the prudence to fill myself to the brim with about a quart of mixed champagne and stout before asking Rosie to come registrar officing with me. That's what you want, champagne and stout. It'll make a new man of you." Kirk Rockaway looked dubious. "But that's alcohol, and I promised my late mother I would never drink alcohol." "Well, I think if you get in touch with her on the Ouija board and explain the situation, making it clear that you needed the stuff for a good cause, she would skip the red tape and tell you to go to it. But that would take time. It might be hours before you got a connection. What you want is a noggin of it now. And then, when you are nicely primed, we will go and drop in on my aunt. She has been away on a Mediterranean cruise, but she may be back now. Waiter, bring us a bottle of Bollinger and all the stout you can carry." It was some half-hour later that Kirk Rockaway looked across the table with a new light in his eyes. They had become reddish in colour and bulged a good deal. His diction, when he spoke, was a little slurred. "Old man," he said, "I like your face." "Do you, old man?" said Bingo. "Yes, old man, I do. And do you know why I like your face?" "No, old man, I don't. Why do you like my face?" "Because it is so different in every respect from Mortimer Frisby's." "Who is Mortimer Frisby?" "You may well ask. He conducts the children's page on the San Francisco Herald and calls himself a critic. Do you know what he said about my last book, old man?" "No. What did he say, old man?" "I'll tell you what he said. His words are graven on my heart, and I quote verbatim. 'We think,' he said, 'that Mr. Rockaway should not too lightly assume that all the children he writes for have water on the brain.' How about that?" "Monstrous." "Monstrous is right. Abominable. Abominable is correct. The man must be mad." "Of course he is. But if he thinks he'll get off on a plea of insanity, he's very much mistaken. I propose to poke him in the snoot. We'll just have one more bottle for the road, and then I'll go and attend to it." "Where is he?" "San Francisco." "You can't go to San Francisco." "Why not? I believe," said Kirk Rockaway, a little stiffly, "that San Francisco is open for being gone to at about this time." "But it's such a long way. Besides, you were going to propose to my aunt." "Was I? Yes. By Jove, you're right. It had slipped my mind." "Do it now, if you're feeling up to it." "Oh, I'm feeling great. I'm feeling strong, forceful, dominant. Do you know what I shall do to that woman?" "Bend her to your will?" "Precisely. I shall stand no nonsense from her. Women are apt to want long engagements and wedding services with full choral effects. But none of that for me. We shall be married. Where was it you said you were married?" "At the registrar's." "They give you quick service there?" "Very quick. Over in a flash." "Then that's the place that gets my custom, and if I hear a yip out of her to the contrary, I shall poke her in the snoot. Come on, pay the check, and let's go." Bingo's jaw fell. "You mean pay the bill?" "Yeah, if that's what you like to call it." "But I thought you were standing me this dinner." "Whatever gave you that silly idea?" "You said you would, because I was Rosie M. Banks's husband." "Whose husband?" "Rosie M. Banks's." "Never heard of her," said Kirk Rockaway. "It's your treat, so come across, or would you prefer that I give you a poke in the snoot?" and his physique was so robust and his manner so intimidating that it seemed to Bingo that he had no alternative. With a groan that came up from the soles of his feet, he felt in his pocket for Mr. Purkiss's £10, and with trembling finger beckoned to the waiter. Bingo's aunt's house was in the Kensington neighbourhood, and thither they repaired in a taxicab. It was a longish journey, but Kirk Rockaway enlivened it with college yells remembered from earlier days. As they alighted, he was in the middle of one, and he finished it while ringing the doorbell. The door opened. Willoughby appeared. Kirk Rockaway tapped him authoritatively on the chest and said, "Take me to your leader." "Sir?" "The Beanstalk Broad. I want a word with her." "Mrs. Beanstalk is not at home, and I would be greatly obliged, sir, if you would pop off." "I will not pop off. I demand to see the woman I love instantly," thundered Kirk Rockaway, continuing to tap the butler like a woodpecker. "There is a plot to keep her from me, and I may mention that I happen to know the ringleaders. If you do not immediately—" He broke off, not because he had said his say, but because he overbalanced and fell down the steps. Bingo, who had entered the hall, thought he saw him bounce twice, but he was in a state of great mental perturbation, and may have been mistaken. Willoughby closed the front door, and Bingo wiped his forehead. His own forehead, not Willoughby's. "Isn't my aunt at home?" "No, sir. She returns to-morrow." "Why didn't you tell the gentleman that?" "The gentleman was pie-eyed, Mr. Richard. Hark at him now." He was alluding to the fact that Kirk Rockaway was now banging on the door with the knocker, at the same time shouting in a stentorian voice that the woman he loved was being held incommunicado by a gang in the pay of Mortimer Frisby. Then abruptly the noise ceased, and Bingo, peering through the little window at the side of the door, saw that the sweet singer of Oakland, San Francisco, was in conversation with a member of the police force. He was too far away to catch the gist of their talk, but it must have been acrimonious, for it had been in progress only a few moments when Kirk Rockaway, substituting action for words, hit the constable on the tip of the nose. The hand of the law then attached itself to his elbow, and he was led away into the night. The magistrate at Bow Street next morning took a serious view of the case. The tidal wave of lawlessness which was engulfing London, he said, must be checked, and those who added fuel to its flames by punching policemen must be taught that they could not escape the penalty of their misdeeds. 14 days, he said, coming to the point, and Bingo, who had attended the proceedings, tottered from the court, feeling that this was the end. No hope now of that well-nourished man marrying his Aunt Myrtle in time to be entered for the fat uncle's stakes. When the judging was done, he would still be in his prison cell, gnawed, Bingo hoped, for he was in bitter mood, by rats. The future looked dark to him. He recalled a poem in which there had occurred the line, "The night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole," and he felt that if he had been asked to describe his general position at the moment, he could not have put the thing better himself. The words fitted his situation like the paper on the wall. Only one ray of hope, and that a faint one, lightened his darkness. Willoughby had said that his aunt would be back from her Mediterranean cruise today, and he had sometimes found her responsive to the touch, if tactfully approached. It was a chance which Charles always pays pikelet, would have estimated at perhaps 100 to 8, but it was a chance. He hastened to her house and pressed the front door-bell. "Good morning, Willoughby." "Good morning, Mr. Richard." "You and your Whistler's mothers." "I would prefer not to dwell on that topic, sir." "So would I. Is my aunt in?" "No, sir. They have gone out to do some shopping." "They?" said Bingo, surprised that the butler should have spoken of his employer, stout though she was, in the plural. "Madam and Sir Hercules, Mr. Richard." "Who on earth is Sir Hercules?" "Madam's husband, sir. Sir Hercules Folio Foljam." "What?" "Yes, sir. It appears that they were shipmates on the cruise with which Madam has just returned. I understand that the wedding took place in Naples." "Well, I'll be blowed. You never know what's going to happen next in these disturbed times, do you?" "No, sir." "Of all the bizarre occurrences, what sort of a chap is he?" "Bald, about the colour of tomato ketchup, and stout." Bingo started. "Stout?" "Yes, sir." "How stout?" "There is a photograph of the gentleman in Madam's boudoir, if you care to see it." "Let's go," said Bingo. He was conscious a strange thrill, but at the same time he was telling himself that he must not raise his hopes too high. Probably, judged by Drone's standards, this new uncle of his would prove to be nothing special. A minute later he had reeled, and a sharp cry had escaped his lips. He was looking spellbound at the photograph of a man so vast, so like a captive balloon, that Kirk Rockaway seemed merely pleasantly plump in comparison. A woman, he felt, even one as globular as his Aunt Myrtle, would have been well advised, before linking her lot with his, to consult her legal adviser to make sure that she was not committing bigamy. A long sigh of ecstasy proceeded from him. "Up from the depths," he murmured. "Up from the depths." "Sir?" Nothing. Just a random thought. I'm going to borrow this photograph, Willoughby. Madam may be annoyed on discovering its absence." "Tell her that she'll have it back this afternoon. I only want to show it to a man at the drones," said Bingo. He was thinking of his coming interview with Oofy Prosser. If Oofy was prepared to meet his terms, he would let him have, say, 20% of this certain winner, but he meant to drive a hard bargain. And that was Stylish Stouts, read by Nick Martin.